Excide's really at it this morning again. It looks like they're running on one burner and everything's smoldering.
Exide stinks so horrible. It smells like somebody died. I mean, you cannot believe the smell up here right now.
I went out at 7 o'clock with the dog and it almost knocked me on my feet. So I hope you have a nice day. I gotta hold my nose.
For years, these residents have complained to government officials trying to get Exide Technologies' battery recycling plant in Laureldale, Pennsylvania, to cut down on the toxic chemicals, including lead and arsenic, it releases into the air. But their complaints have had little impact.
There's been a lot of frustration in dealing with regulatory agencies.
That frustration is echoed in communities across the country. Citizens have had to step in when regulators fail to stop companies from emitting high levels of hazardous pollutants. Pollutants which can cause cancer, brain damage, and other serious health problems.
The link between, the illegal action and the consequences is kind of broken. You need an active investigative program, and neither EPA or the states have adequate resources.
21 years ago, Congress strengthened the Clean Air Act in an attempt to limit emissions from 189 of the most toxic chemicals.
And every city in America should have clean air.
But that's not what a joint investigation by the Center for Public Integrity and NPR found. Federal and state regulators are still struggling to control toxic pollution in industries as diverse as oil refineries, copper smelters, and corn processing plants. Make no mistake, the air many people breathe is cleaner today than 20 years ago. The EPA says overall, toxic air emissions have dropped by 40%.
In the last year alone, programs established since 1990 are estimated to have reduced premature mortality risks equivalent to saving over 160,000 lives.
But many known polluters have continued to poison the air. Thousands of facilities are emitting hundreds of millions of pounds of hazardous air pollutants, including potential carcinogens such as benzene, formaldehyde, and vinyl chloride. As recently as this summer, the EPA's own list of chronic or serious Clean Air Act violators included more than 400 facilities. One of those facilities is Exide.
Thanksgiving morning, real bad.
George Hansberger lives near the plant. He says that the smell gets worse on holidays and weekends.
You could almost set your clock on it.
Under the Clean Air Act, state regulators are supposed to ensure that companies follow the law. Hansberger has complained to them so many times.
They got sick and tired of hearing from me. I said, for crying out loud, you do your job. One of your initials stands for protection. Protect me.
Odors are just one of the residents' problems. A bigger worry is lead, released when Exide breaks apart car batteries. State officials have made some efforts. Over the past 10 years, they found 161 air violations and fined Exide $436,000, an amount the company reassures shareholders doesn't impair the bottom line. The company declined to be interviewed on camera, but said in a statement that Exide has made continuous improvements at its Reading facility over the years. Gavin Biebeck is an environmental consultant who has tracked the emissions Exide reported to regulators in recent years. But when he compared those figures to what outside air monitors measured next to the plant, he found a potentially more troubling issue. The amount of lead around the plant was higher than the amount the company reported to regulators.
What that means is either the companies are underreporting lead emission, or there are other sources of lead emissions that are not being reported.
Anyone else have any comments?
Exide's lead problem is what caused Republican County Commissioner Mark Scott to question a new permit the state issued Exide last year. A permit he says does not require enough monitoring.
And we think that that is a step in the wrong direction.
Insufficient monitoring is a challenge many communities face.
The monitoring is shockingly bad. What kind of system is that? And what can you do in an enforcement context when the underlying structure is rotten?
Scott hopes to fix that problem at Exide. Last year, the county sued the state to force it to overturn Exide's permit. Company officials say the permit is sufficient, and that its lead data accurately quantify the emissions levels from the facility. State regulators wouldn't discuss Exide because the litigation is ongoing. But when the agency released the permit, it wrote in a press release that, with past air quality violations corrected and updated requirements now in place, Exide is now in a position to be a better neighbor.
That dust be blowing, and that smell be coming with it. Whew.
About 65 miles away from Exide, residents in Chester, Pennsylvania, have faced similar problems with air pollution. Their challenge? More than a dozen air polluting facilities in Chester and bordering towns along the river.
All right, Mr. Patrick.
Reverend Horace Strand has been fighting these facilities for nearly 20 years.
We're getting closer to the plant. You can count the blocks. You smell it, yeah?
There's been progress. Citizen protests have stopped some industries from coming in. And finally, companies and regulators have worked together reducing emissions. But when new facilities want to come online, regulators don't consider the total impact of emissions from so many facilities so close to one another.
We issue permits, and we still do today, on an individual facility basis, and we don't yet know how to deal with cumulative risks associated with all those things.
State regulation of hazardous air is only getting more difficult as states see their budgets cut. And on the federal level, new air toxic rules mandated 21 years ago are being challenged by some members of Congress.
This EPA has been so aggressive.
EPA officials would not agree to an in-person meeting, but in a telephone interview said that while the agency had done a lot,
We're really still playing catch-up. There are sectors that are still very large emitters that we really need to get standards in place.
meanwhile, some citizens keep pushing, hoping their efforts will improve the air.
I mean, I'm not out to shut down Exide. I just want to live in a clean environment.